the What's Buzzin podcast. I'm your host, Sam Degnan, and along with me, Michael Fraley and Will Mortensen. We're on episode 7 now, and today we're doing another rewatch. Actually, this isn't a rewatch. This is a first-time watch because we've never seen, none of us have seen this movie before. So I watched the movie last night, and the movie was Zero Dark 30. I think it came out in 2013. It's a movie about, the chase for Osama bin Laden, and it follows the CIA intelligence operative Maya. I didn't catch her last name, but
There isn't one. There never is one.
there's never a last name. It's
She's
just
only
Maya.
ever referred to by her first name. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it's kind of weird actually.
Well, I think I was told that she might still be in the CIA, so that might have been. But I don't think her name was Maya. They probably changed the name. Yeah. But I really like the movie. I have not watched a lot of war or political thriller movies like that, so this was a bit of something new for me, and I really enjoyed it. So like Mike and Mort, you guys watch a lot more war movies than I do. Can you share your thoughts on this one? How it compares to those?
Yeah, I mean, the movie that I kind of most immediately relate this one to is the 13 Hours movie, the Benghazi movie with John Krasinski, where the U.S. embassy is attacked, or there's a U.S. embassy attacked, and it's basically like kind of drawn out like attack on American forces abroad, dealing with kind of terrorist threats abroad. And I think like one criticism about that movie is how like battle and war is kind of over glorified, and like I guess like weapon use and violence is just generally over glorified in that movie. So I didn't think, like, obviously there are a lot of like explosion scenes here, but I thought in this movie, in Zero Dark 30, that all kind of added to the point. I didn't think that anything was really over glorified when it came to actual like the seal scene or like explosion scenes. I didn't think that was over glorified. So that was kind of a big takeaway I had when I was comparing the two movies. But I don't know if Mike has anything else to add there.
Well, I would say it's definitely not too much over glorified. I think personally, I think there wasn't as much like battle action that I expected. I expected
Right.
a lot more. I was really surprised that, and we'll get into this in a bit, but that the SEALs showed up like with 50 minutes left in the movie. Like, the whole time I was going in there, I'm like, all right, we're gonna get some action right away. Some kind of battle, some kind of fight somewhere. And really, like, even the last 30 minutes, the raid on Bin Laden's compound, like, I mean, that's like the most action filled part of the movie, and there's still not that much in that scene.
Yeah, I felt like the action was really, really gritty and grounded, mostly because like it was really intense because there was no music, right? So when they got to the compound, right, the music cuts out and it's just the darkness and you can hear some noise in the background, but other than that, it's just like really quiet. And as they're like making their approach, like I was really nervous because of like jump scares and stuff, and I don't do well with that. And so when the guy shot out of the door right away, that like kind of spooked me because I wasn't ready for that. But I felt like the action in this movie, it was really efficient, mostly because like it wasn't like didn't take a lot of time with like these like you said glorified shots, right? They took like this simple approach, especially in the filmmaking too, with the cuts that they made, cinematography wise. But yeah, I'm glad that they spent more time focusing on the work that went into finding bin Laden, because like in actuality, like that's most of the work was finding bin Laden, and the actual mission was only like less than 2 hours long. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I really like the way that this movie was just was framed and shot.
I think another thing too is like, instead of going for just straight action and killing and violence, I think what it does perfectly is building tension and excitement through scenes that like aren't necessarily like the most not the most exciting thing, but like it builds tension perfectly in a lot of its scenes. And the one I think of the most is the suicide bombing at the compound that kills Maya's friend. I'm forgetting her name.
I think it's Jessica.
Yeah, it's like right away, and that's like it's like a 5-minute scene that plays out, but like right away when you see the car coming from the distance, you're like, well,
This is bad news.
isn't right. Something's gonna go wrong here. And then they tell the cop, and then they tell the other soldiers to stand down. It's like, okay, why are you doing that? You just know something's coming. And like in comparison to that, the scene at the hotel where it gets bombed when they're having dinner, like you have no idea. You literally no idea what's coming. Like I was sitting there during that part. I'm like, well, we're 40 minutes in. To be honest, I'm kind of bored. Like, when is this?
I mean, I wasn't bored, but I wasn't
bored. But I was like, okay, when's there's got to be some kind of action here, or like when it's building on, like when it shows like the different terror attacks that went on throughout the world by the soldiers, and it's like, or by the Al Qaeda. It's like, it right before it happens, it does a great job of building tension there, which I think I really like that approach to this kind of movie versus just straight up action and fighting and killing.
Yeah, I think now is the perfect time where we go through where we start, looking through some of the scenes in the movie. I thought the first scene where it was like just the intro where it was all black, right? The screen was black and you could just hear like some of the phone calls from the people who were stuck in the Twin Towers. And I thought that was really haunting, and it was really disturbing. And it kind of set the stage, like, to remind people, like, this is what happened. So, like, when we go and see the first scene with Amar, like, it gets us mentally prepared.
Yeah,
I think that's their attempt to contextualize everything. And I agree that it's like pretty powerful. Maybe the link between that scene and like the next scene isn't as clear, but I think the fact that there is context at the beginning is like helpful. Obviously, as the viewer, we have like a lens through which to view kind of the first scene and the rest of the movie.
Well, I think, I would agree with you guys. I think what it does, to me, how I interpreted that, though, is like those scenes are not like explicitly connected, but, you have all these phone calls from people on 9/11 that make you like, you're right, they are haunting. They make you feel sad. And then as a result, like you're right off the bat, you're kind of motivated. You're like, all right, well, we got to get revenge for this. We got to get vengeance. And it sets up the question of like, because then it goes right into the torture scene. And then it kind of sets up the question of like, what's ethical and what's not. And like, should we be motivated to torture these guys because they caused all this pain and suffering for people? So I think that was a very, I guess, creative way to set up that question, that central question in the movie.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that's a really good point. The fact that those first like phone calls can incite some anger, and like this kind of desire for justice or even vengeance. And I think like leading right into the torture scene, like that shows that there's this underlying vengeance throughout. And I think Maya kind of feels that as well after Jessica's killed. So I think, Mike, you're definitely right that those first two scenes create this attitude of vengeance that's there kind of underlying throughout the entire movie.
There was this quote in the first scene from Dan. He says to Amar when he's trying to make Amar feel hopeless, right? He was trying to make him see how helpless he is in his current situation. He says, in the end, everybody breaks, bro. It's just biology. And that was like, I was like, that's a really good line. I should write that down. And, we can get into this with the final scene where it's just Maya on the plane back to the United States, I think. But it's just, in the end, like, even like the strongest people who have to go through all the things like that Maya went through, right? They like war and even being behind the scenes, and like revenge, like that can all just be so draining. And especially if you've lost, well, like Maya lost throughout this movie, right? It was no surprise to see the final scene where she just breaks down and she isn't even happy that, Bin Laden was killed. It was more of just like relief and just the culmination of all the emotions she's been, subduing while she's been trying to figure this out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the performances in this movie. I thought Dan, the actor who was Dan with the guy with long,
Jason Clarke, yeah.
He was very good. I think I was a little frustrated when he left, when he went back to the United States, and then just was like kind of out of the picture for most of the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, he was in the first act, but once his monkeys were killed, and he was like, "I'm going back," and I mean, I don't know. That kind of frustrated me because I really liked. He was really like charismatic, and even as he was doing these horrible things, like with the torture scenes and stuff, like you were still like kind of drawn to him, which like kind of made me feel conflicted in a way. Did you guys feel that at all?
Yeah, it was weird. I thought I don't think the directors developed like his and Maya's relationship that well, to be honest, because I think it was a lot like they kind of glossed over all the complications within their relationship. Because at the start, like during the torture scenes, you can see obviously Dan's administering like this punishment when Amar's lying to him or not like telling him what he wants to know, and Maya's there kind of looking on, like she has to look away at some points, and then she ends up changing course with their tactics and getting information out of him. But then it's weird because like right before Dan leaves to go back, they have this like moment around the monkey cages where they seem like they have this friendship, and then obviously she calls him for help later on. So I guess like there's not really a link between like the first relationship in the torture chamber and then how they develop a friendship. So the relationship development isn't great, but I agree. I think Jason Clarke was good. And I think it definitely, like we definitely could have used more of him later on in the movie. It seems weird that he was there, kind of the main guy from the beginning and then disappeared a little bit.
I think one knock I have on this movie, and this is kind of what I was saying earlier, how like when that hotel explosion happened, I said like I was kind of bored before that in a way. Like I don't necessarily think it was bad up until then, but I feel like there's there's something missing as far as like character development or like showing about the characters. I don't know if I can exactly, because I don't think it's bad, like how the beginning of the movie opens. I don't think it's bad, but I feel like they just kind of established the fact that like Maya's just like a bit of a hard ass in a way, but like they don't really, outside of that, like there's not, I mean, obviously there's a development that like in the beginning, she like can't really watch the torture. And then like 45 minutes later, like she's leading interrogations and like telling the other guy to hit the guy or do the waterboarding or whatever. So I feel like there's a bit of character development there, but like, I feel like there should have been a little something more.
One thing that I think that I kind of overlooked initially, but then I thought about it more was how they established like how smart she was, and the way that they did this was through the scene with Amar where it's like we should go at him again, and she was like they don't need to know that we failed, or he doesn't need to know that we failed. So then she was part of the tactics where they could convince Amar that everything was fine and that he like gave up secrets. And I thought that was just like a really smart way of thinking about it. And the way that they like proved to us that Maya was smart was like through, showing rather than telling, you know what I mean, Mike, like you said. And so I'm glad that they did that. But I kind of agree with you. At the beginning, there was a couple things that kind of confused me. There was a lot of like characters in this movie that I didn't know their names.
Yeah.
Like I knew Maya, I knew Dan, mostly because of subtitles I was watching with, and then Jessica I knew as well, but like there's a bunch like the army guys. I had no clue what their names were. I just knew it was like Chris Pratt.
The guy who plays the cop in The Wolf of Wall Street, like the FBI agent.
Yeah, I didn't know his name.
Yeah, I didn't know his name either.
Yeah, I didn't, and he was, and that's another thing. Like, it's not just the name. Like, I agree with you. I didn't know people's names, but it was also like their like roles, because there's obviously so much like hierarchy that's exhibited, but like there's no like explanation of like where people stand in the hierarchy, and that they kind of just like establish that as they go. So it was kind of weird. Like, I didn't know like really who answered to who at times, because there are so many different people who have like different levels of like status or like administrative like power kind of, and that's just kind of like worked with as they go. There's no like establishment of that early on.
And then I also think, because so now we're past the torture scene. Now I'm just thinking about the first meeting room scene. So Dan, I think the other guy's name was Joe. He was like the head of the embassy, and then he got booted midway through the movie. I think his name was Joe. But she's introduced to Joe, and they go into the meeting room, right? And like I felt like I could understand like a lot of what was going on, like after this point. This scene, like I was so confused. They were saying all these things super quickly, and I just couldn't follow.
Didn't make sense.
And then also like I just didn't really like that scene a lot, because then Maya says something or corrects Jessica, right? Maya's like, no, I think you're wrong, to Jessica, basically. And she kind of does it in a snarky way. And like Jessica looks like frustrated, or like looks frustrated at Maya. And it seems like they're not going to like each other. But then they just magically go to being friends in the next movie or the next scene. And I was a little confused. Like, I feel like if that scene was done a little bit better, like I could follow a little more what was going on, right? And then also the explanation of why Jessica and Maya are friends would make a lot more sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think like that's part of the thing like I didn't really like about the movie was it wasn't like they condensed time so much, so like relationships can't be developed, but they also didn't really like there were a lot of like specific like analytical things or methods that like Maya and the team used to kind of like make inroads into their search for like Abu Ahmed and bin Laden. And I think like they condensed time so much that we didn't really have time to like understand that as viewers before they were already like moving on to their next like the next piece of the puzzle. So like I didn't always understand like when they were looking for like a phone number, or they were looking for like that one scene where they go and like capture that guy. They're all wearing like the black like full body covers to go capture that guy. Like there was no build up to that, and I didn't even understand like what was going on really.
Yeah, I didn't know
right after. So it just seemed like there were so many different scattered pieces that we never really had time to understand like the details of their search for bin Laden.
I think too, like outside of that, because I agree, part of that just went like, I mean, maybe we all just missed it, but I also feel like it was just done too fast paced and too all over the place. But like, I think it's what it's trying to do is establish because this is obviously a central theme throughout the movie, that like she's a woman in the CIA, like trying to find a voice or trying to find a place, which like, doesn't really happen all the time. It's not very common. I think she's like kind of trying to break some barriers in a way. But I feel like it tries to focus on that too much versus like giving us character insights and like telling us like what she's like as a person, other than her being, kind of intense.
Well, I disagree with that a little bit, because they kind of point that out. So when she's sitting down for lunch, right, and then the big dude with the glasses comes up. So I know he's like this high up CIA official. Again, I don't know his name. I don't know his position. That isn't clearly stated at all.
Yeah.
I want, now that I'm thinking about I wonder if this movie would have more of an impact, or I'd understand it a little bit more if I knew if I knew like more backstory about like, you know, the CIA and you know, like Al Qaeda and such, but it was kind of a little confusing at times. But Mike, anyway, back to your point, like with Maya, I think her main thing was that she was super intense and she's been doing this since she came out of high school, right? She was recruited out of high school. You can see she's clearly drained. This is like all she does. Like when she goes and sits down to eat with Jessica at the hotel, she's like on her phone, like still figuring it out. She doesn't really have much, you know, she's like super dedicated. Like that's her thing. You know what I mean? And I also felt like, because I was also like a little concerned like going into this movie because sometimes when like the perception of like, you know, I don't know. I think I know what you mean, Mike, about what you're saying with like she didn't really have that it could have like fleshed out a little bit more with um what she was doing in the movie, but I thought her personality was that she was like super dedicated and super focused and that was kind of her thing.
Yeah, but I get that, but to me, there's nothing outside of that.
I think that's the point.
But to me though, that's kind of a bland character.
Well,
Like,
I actually agree. I agree with both of you. I think that the point that they're trying to make is the point they're trying to get across is like this journey to find bin Laden just keeps becoming more and more personal for her and she can't escape it. And she's just like locked in on like this personal journey to like find bin Laden when there's kind of outside factors saying that's not the only goal. But I also agree with Mike that her care, like we don't necessarily feel that like the power behind her personal journey because we don't know anything about her and she's kind of thrown in right at the beginning. And like also another thing with that is I don't think we understand, like the movie doesn't do a very good job of showing us how long this process was, because I think it condenses everything so much that we think this was like a like rapid, like intense process, not a really drawn out one. And I think the numbers on the wall, it's trying to do that.
I think
like,
that that's a little bit better.
But yeah, it helped, but I don't think it helped enough for me.
I agree.
And it kind of like there's periods where it skips like 2 or 3 years, but then like you wouldn't know if it skipped 3 years or it's the next day. Quite honestly, that I agree. That's another problem I have with it.
The more I talk about it, the more I'm just realizing how flawed this movie really was, even though I really liked it.
I mean,
I like it too. It's just I think it's these things, and I'll get into this when I do like my eventual score, but it's things like this in the beginning that I feel like I've done wrong or just unnecessary.
Yeah.
Another thing too, when building her like friendship with Jessica, you know, it's clear that they spend like 15 minutes like focusing on Jessica and Maya, but like to me though, I feel like whenever a movie does that,
you saw her death scene coming a mile away.
Kind of a sign, you know, like it's not obvious. Like, I don't want to credit myself and like, oh, I'm so smart, I saw this coming.
No, Mike, I saw it coming too. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, it's like kind of a giveaway in a way, because like, okay, well, why are you focusing on her so much?
Like when she baked them a cake, like I was like, she's so dead. Like,
it's like and the only reason that they like, I think you can tell that the only reason they build up Maya and Jessica's relationship is so that like we can understand why Maya's devastated and more motivated when Jessica dies.
Mm-hmm.
But I think like the fact that they don't actually care that much about the relationship, they just care about Maya being able to have a reaction, makes the relationship development kind of like flawed.
That further, like, because I'm not buying their friendship really.
Yeah, right.
That further kind of like when she dies and it's like, okay, well, that's her motivation for trying to kill bin Laden. I don't buy that as much now because I'm not invested in the relationship.
Yeah. I felt like if they would have built up their friendship a little more naturally over the first hour, I think it would have been a little bit better. Also, like Jessica's like death seems like it would have been much better if it was like near like the end of the second act. You know what I mean? Because like kind of like thinking about The Dark Knight, right? Rachel's death like occurred at the end of the second act, which was like perfect for Bruce, like to spur Bruce on and keep going, right? But like this was at the beginning of the second half, like an hour in, you still had an hour and a half left, and then like by the time the SEALs get to, get to the compound, it's already been like an hour since Jessica has passed, and so like it doesn't feel. I don't know. It's just tough because like I really like the movie, but now I'm thinking about the structure and all that. I think it was like the way it was structured plot wise was like pretty flawed.
And when you mentioned like separating acts and stuff, you know how there was like those weird times when they'd go like blank screen and there would be words. It would say like human error or like something like that.
Yeah.
Like I thought that was kind of weird. Like I didn't really like that. It made the movie seem like kind of cheesy that it was like trying to separate it up into different or they were trying to like identify weird themes for the viewer.
Yeah.
It seemed like they were trying to like identify themes through just like saying words on the screen instead of actual like character development.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like that like took away from the movie for me. I didn't really like how they were like putting just words on the screen.
Telling you how you're supposed to interpret a certain chunk of the movie.
Yeah.
Well,
it was like a presentation at times instead of a movie. It was kind of weird.
What did they say? I thought it was just for like time changes. Why did it say human error again? I'm a little confused.
I don't even know. That's why, because it was kind of random.
There were like two or three of them.
Yeah, there were 2 or 3, and it wasn't just like time change. It wasn't just like saying like location, because I know there was something like at the bottom right. It would say like now they're in Poland or something, but like it wasn't saying location. It was like identifying themes for like the next act or the next scene, and it was like, well, the theme should show because like we can recognize it through acting and through scenes, not through like you telling us like what's happening.
Yeah. Let's move on in the plot. So from there,
there's a couple different terror attacks mixed in too. Like the one in London with the bus, and the one, I forget what the first one is. If it's at like, well, there's the one at the hotel too, but there's the one before that.
There's one in New York. There's a bunch. I don't know. I think that was part of just to like show the chaos, right? But then when you mix it in with the plot, it didn't really work as well as I kind of wanted it to.
I feel like that part of like they're using, do I think like there's a good amount of tension in those terror attacks? Yeah. I think they're good at like kind of scarring you in a way, saying like, wow, this is intense. But I feel like they're using that as like motivation, which I think I don't necessarily think that's bad, but I feel like that doesn't tell me anything about like Maya specifically, because if anyone sees that, they're going to get pissed and they're going to be sad and they're going to be like, well, do something about this.
And I think like obviously it's a movie, and I know like there have been criticisms about it's like how accurate it is, or questions about how accurate it is and stuff. And the screenwriter said it like isn't a documentary, which gives them, so they obviously had some freedom to change things.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like this would be better if it was like a documentary series instead of like one movie. I think they'd have more time to like do everything they tried to do.
Yeah, like I feel like them finding the photo of Abu Ahmed, like that took like 25 minutes in the movie, which is like, okay, you could probably have taken less time there, but like if they could have spanned that out for an entire episode, I feel like what you said more, that would have worked better. Okay, so after the first meeting scene, there was that interrogation scene with Amar, but it was with Maya and Dan together, and I also kind of like just like the juxtaposition and with like the lighting in that scene, right? When Amar was first being interrogated by Dan, right? He was in this like little box. It was dark, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very little space, no food. He was bleeding, right? But with Maya, it was it's this open, like beautiful scenery, like really good food. He had a lot of space, right? It was just like the complete opposite. And that was the time where Maya was able to get information out, whereas Dan wasn't able to get any information out. So I've seen arguments online about how this movie was like pro-torture and such, but I just don't think that was the case at all, because like this movie did a really good job of like contrasting those two scenes. And if you like look in depthly at those two scenes, you can see like, oh, this is the way to go about doing things, right? This is how you get information out of, captives. Like this, there's a method to this that doesn't involve brutal torture. And after the first act, we were talking about this earlier, there are no more torture scenes. Like they show an Obama clip on 60 Minutes to like make a point of this, right? So like I think in the beginning, like the torture scenes were effective, and I think like they were effective in showing how like brutal it was, and it was tough to watch. But I don't think this movie was like conveying the pro-torture point at all. I mean, maybe that's just me, but I don't think it was like torture is good. I don't think it said that.
Well, to me, I agree. I don't think it's pushing the narrative that like you have to torture people to get what you want. I think it's more just bringing to light the question of like if you should.
Yeah.
Because also they don't really get, because it's interesting. They don't, like what you said, they don't get anywhere by torturing Amar. Like they don't get the information, because they ask him like when are the attacks happening, and he's like Sunday, Monday, Tuesday.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. I interpreted that as him just like messing with them in a way.
I had no clue what he was doing. That was really creepy.
Mike, I agree with you. I originally thought it was like him just kind of messing with them and like showing them he's never going to give in. But then like later on when they started talking about like the memory loss from sleep deprivation and stuff, I was wondering if it could have been something related to that, but I don't know.
Yeah. But yeah, so they don't really get what they want by torturing him. But like in the scene we're talking about where they're having like lunch together and he's like telling them stuff, and then like Dan asked him a question, and I think he goes like, he says something along the lines of, I don't really know. And then Dan again goes, if you lie to me, I'm going to hurt you, which is something he said in the beginning torture scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And then he gets R to like say more. So I feel like, obviously it doesn't work when they're torturing him, but the threat of violence against him kind of worked in that case, and it's like the other guy too later on where he's like, I don't want to get hurt. I'll tell you everything right away. That's kind of like, that's not specifically torture, but it's like the idea of torture more.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like talk, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's interesting how it has that kind of like combination.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there was, I guess, like the fact that they were more just bringing up the idea of torture than I didn't think they were overly like pushing the effectiveness or necessity of torture in the movie. But I will say that I was reading a review, and there was a Washington Post article about a CIA veteran who said like that basically like the torture scenes were kind of inaccurate in the movie, saying that like there really wasn't, like, even before Obama came into office, so this was between like 2002 and 2007, like there wasn't really any like severe long-term torture going on. Like most detainees weren't like being tortured, and the ones who were, it was just for like the first few days that they were detained, and it wasn't like super extreme. Mm-hmm. So obviously it's complicated, like coming from a CIA veteran, but I agree with you guys. Like I don't think that we should look too deep into like criticizing these scenes at the beginning, because I don't think they were overly trying to push one specific agenda.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on. Once they got into the Abu Ahmed parts of the movie, I thought those were really well done. I mean, that's when I was like, okay, now I'm starting to get a grip on what's going on. I could follow like the path of the movie, and like they were jumping to different interviews, and Maya was looking at these tapes and she was trying to figure things out, and then she would approach with Jessica to Joe, who's the main guy at the embassy, with her theories, and she would like get denied, right? But I felt like that part of the movie was really well done, up until like the hotel scene, and Jessica's big break where she gets to meet which eventually ended to her death. But I thought that part of the movie was really, really good.
Yeah, I think I know like the search, like once it's kind of everything's focused around the search for Abu Ahmed, I think everything kind of becomes a little clearer. I agree with you. And that search is like riveting. I still think it could be better because I think like they have some like random successes in the search that come out of nowhere. When the guy comes up to Maya and he's like, I know this is a little later, but he's like your guy just purchased a phone and we can track it. Or like where it's gonna ring every time your phone here is gonna ring every time his rings. Like that was kind of like out of the blue for me. But I think like that whole process culminating in them like driving in circles in that town, like trying to find him in his car. I thought that scene was really good.
Yeah, and then also like real quick, Mike, but like I felt like there was a lot of points in the movie where Maya would just have people like come up to her and like give her like clues to spur her on. Like, here's this phone, like now we can track her phone. Or what if we have the interview at this place where it's on both ground, like that guy who we've never even know his name just says this one like really smart thing, and like that pushes the narrative. And it didn't really feel earned, I guess, for Maya because we know Maya is like super smart and we know that she can do all these things, but it just was like I don't really understand why that was being pushed like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, but it's like it's kind of like this montage of her, like, and not a montage, it's like 50 minutes of her like finding things. And I think another, like you guys said, the scene with the white car where they're tracking him, and then like the two motorcycles pull in front of I think his name was Kareem, the one soldier or the one US operative. So like pull in front of him and you think they're gonna get in a shootout or something. But like I think scenes like that, the tension is great.
Yeah.
But the thing with me, like, I liked all that, but I don't understand. Like, I haven't bought into the process and the grind of like trying to figure this out as much.
I agree.
That's where the movie loses some points for me because I think it's definitely more clear in this scene, like after Jessica dies and like the what she keeps doing to figure out more information, what people do to give her information. But I don't know what it is. I'm just not like I'm not not that I'm not on board with it, but it doesn't hit the same as if I was like really motivated for her to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not, because I don't think they set it up right in the beginning.
Yeah, there's a difference between like understanding what's happening and like actually being like super engaged in their mission. And like you said, like I'm not super engaged with like what they're doing, and I'm not like fully into their process of like finding Abu Ahmed and then Bin Laden. I think like we're too removed as viewers from like what's happening to actually like feel a part of what's going on.
Yeah. And then my thing was like with Maya, dude, there was times where she kind of felt like not invulnerable at all. Mostly just because like she was in the hotel, right? And then she escapes with like out of scratch. And then the scene where she's attacked at the embassy and then just like, again, escapes without a scratch. And then also like, maybe I missed this, but like they sent her back to the United States. And then by the end of the movie, she's back in Pakistan for the attack, which I don't really remember if that was explained clearly or not. But I don't know. Like, I really liked the performance, and and the movie showed glimpses, right? The thing with that kind of like frustrates me now is that the movie showed glimpses of developing Maya's character and showing like how she's like making it up, in the CIA. Like particularly, there's this one scene where, there's this one shot during the scene where the bad guy from the Wolf of Wall Street is chewing out the entire like meeting room, right? And
I don't think that was him though. I think that was a different guy.
That was a different guy. That was a different guy.
Like we're not doing our jobs. People are dying. Are you talking about that scene?
yeah, or maybe no, yeah, it was that guy. Oh, there's multiple guys. Wow.
It was a different guy. The guy from Wolf of Wall Street was actually part of the group getting chewed out.
Yeah.
Okay, but the guy who was chewing those guys out, right? There's this shot where it was Maya, right?
I don't know who anybody is.
Yeah, we don't know. Yeah, that's part of the problem.
I know. There's so many characters that aren't really explained. But anyway, there's this shot where Maya's at the end of the table, right? And she's the only one making eye contact with the guy who's, yelling at them, and all the other men are just like looking nervously down, and they're clearly not doing anything to help the situation, and Maya's the only one getting stuff done. Like, that's a beautiful shot, and that shows us like how dedicated she is and how unafraid she is. Like, that's the good stuff we're looking for. You know what I mean? But then there's the line where it's like when she's in the meeting room and she's like, it's actually 8 feet, like 0.82 of a mile. And I was like, like there's, you know what I mean? And then it goes to the next line where it's like, I'm the mofo that did this, right?
Yeah.
And like that worked, you know what I mean? That worked. But then where it's like, I'm 0.82, like, like it goes from like making her seem really like awesome and badass, but then also like making her seem like really stuck up and like it doesn't know what it wants to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is so, Dagan, I know you're going to like this comparison, but I think what we're getting at is that, she's kind of a character with like not like none or maybe like one or two flaws. And that's the thing we're talking about with her depth and why I don't think it's really there. And this is the logic I have with Rey from Star Wars, from the new Star Wars. Like yeah, no, she's like, the problem I have with her in those movies is she's a perfect character. She's no flaws. She can do anything, right?
Yeah.
Which kind of takes away, because I think all of the best characters have flaws. They have deep issues. But like with Maya, I don't, is her flaw that she's a woman in a male-dominated CIA? Because I feel like that's more what it's getting at the whole time. If you want to do that, you can do that. I think that's a great point to make. But like that can't be the character's flaw, like it seems like that's what gets in her way sometimes instead of like some own personal issue. And I just personally don't like that, because that doesn't tell me anything about the character, and I care less about the character,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I actually think that. Yeah, I think that could be one of the a flaw or a problem for her, but they don't develop that fully. Like, they don't highlight that as the main problem.
They could have also made her flaw be like the fact that she doesn't really have an outside life and that she's been grinding, in the CIA for all this time, for 12 straight years out of high school, and that she doesn't really have that much of a social life. And it could show like that the movie could make a point on like how Bin Laden and Al Qaeda have taken this away from her because of her devotion to her country, and it could have the cool theme of patriotism and isolation, right? That there was so much potential for that, but the movie just kind of didn't do much with it. And like the fact that I still liked Maya as a character is a credit to the actress's performance.
Yeah.
And the performances throughout this movie, I think we can agree, were all great. I mean, the soldiers, the SEALs were likable.
Yeah. There would have been more SEALs. I thought it makes sense with the story, but I wish there would have been more with the SEALs.
More, I think you're right. This definitely would have been better as a documentary. I do think so. I mean, part of that they can't do because, again, it's the CIA and they're not going to reveal that much stuff. But
right.
like a inspired by a true story documentary where it's a 3-part series, I think that would have worked much better.
Yeah.
I think too, though, like, we were talking about the scene where the one guy comes and chews all of them out and saying like, people are dying, we're not doing our job.
Mm-hmm.
Like that throughout time and time again in the movie. And this is kind of the same thing that the terror attacks do by how they keep showing these. It's like, they're costing lives by not finding him. They're costing lives that are not finding him. They need to figure this out now. But like, that's it. Like, that's the only thing that is like repeated too much. And I feel like, we already understand that by showing like one or two of the terror attacks. Like we understand what's at stake here. We understand people are dying. Like you don't need to keep telling us that.
Yeah. This movie just does a good job. Like it has points, Mike, where it shows rather than tells, and it's really good filmmaking.
I know I'm kind of bashing on it a lot, but I still do think this is a good movie.
I say for the last part of this episode, let's get into the final battle or the final attack on Osama's compound, and then let's get into our official reviews.
Yeah.
I really like the last scene with the attack on the compound. I thought it was super intense.
As soon as they introduced the SEALs, like the last 50 minutes were great, honestly.
I think Chris Pratt, I was so surprised to see Chris Pratt in this movie, but seeing him gave this movie legitimacy in my mind. I don't know, just seeing him as a goofy yet really intense and kind of scary SEAL who is really, tactical and can get stuff done. That was really awesome because again, he's hilarious. This movie's also low-key really funny too. There are some funny scenes. I'm trying to think back. There's one in the early part where Maya had this funny line, but I think this movie, there are some laughs to be had in this movie.
Yeah.
But
a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. I think definitely, yeah, to that point, I think the SEALs add a very necessary flavor to the movie. At first I'm I see Chris Pratt, I'm Chris Pratt, what is he doing here?
Yeah.
And then he turns out to be really good. And I think the thing, honestly, that the movie does best is they build the kind of persona of a SEAL, and all of the guys who are SEALs have that persona, and I think the way that the movie conveys that consistently throughout, there's this consistent attitude among the SEALs and this consistent identity that's collective identity. I think that's really good. And I think Chris Pratt, I mean, we talked about Jessica Chastain, she won a Golden Globe for this, but I think Chris Pratt was really good too.
Well, I kind of just I think a light bulb just kind of went off in my head because when you guys said that the SEALs brought a different flavor to this movie, I think that's what I kind of realized it's missing. It's not just Maya, for example, but none of the characters are really they're all kind of bland, to be honest, up until Chris Pratt gets there and all the SEALs are there. Which, by the way, I forgot to mention when we did our favorite actors. I didn't mention Chris Pratt for some reason. Chris Pratt's definitely on my list.
Yeah.
I think he's just the best. He's funny. He can do anything. Mm-hmm. He's already in a lot of stuff. I wish he'd be in probably every movie, but just a quick side note there. But yeah, I like you said, these SEALs, they do add the flavor. And that's why I think, as far as the last 30 minutes go and the raid goes, that's great. I just wish there would have been more about the SEALs.
Because the thing with these characters that we had in the first part of the movie, they're so plot based. You know what I mean? It's now we got to do this, now we got to do this. There's not a lot of time for character development, and when there is, it's forced because the time I'm thinking about is with Jessica, right? And Jessica's character development is forced for the sake of pushing Maya's character forward. Yeah. But anyway, with the stuff with the SEALs, right? You can just tell when they're chilling before they're going, you could see these guys are good dudes. They're talking about their families, right? They're talking about their futures, and as they're going into battle, not only does this add a layer of guilt for Maya too, which is really subtle, because she's the one sending him in there because she is the one who firmly believes that Osama's in there.
One of them dies, it's kind of on her.
Yeah, and they do a decent job with explaining it, with just facial expressions and stuff. But I feel there could have been some more dialogue in there, just to push that idea forward. You know what I mean? But anyway, with even the one thing I'm thinking about is when there's that one guy who kills Bin Laden, right? And you can just see the shock on his face after he does it, because he's he knows what he's done, right? And there's not
Yeah.
it's so weird because it's like it's excitement and it's also like all these overwhelming emotions because this one guy did so many bad things to Americans, right? And this is what everyone's been, going for, and now he was the guy to do it. You know what I mean? So it was all this, like even with just like a couple subtle facial expressions, like I felt
Yeah.
like there was a little more flavor, like you said, in these seals than in some of the main characters.
Yeah. And I know like to that scene, like when he gets like the guy shoots bin Laden and the other guy's like, dude, do you realize what you just did?
Yeah.
And it's like there's so much, like it's like a monumental moment that's kind of like hidden beneath like how focused the SEALs are on the mission and how they have like kind of this lighthearted attitude, but also they have like this real efficiency.
Yeah.
So I think like honestly, like that raid is like just super well done. And another thing I'll mention about the raid is when other people from that village or town come like walking towards them, and it's like I don't know if the guy's Pakistani who's part of the SEAL team and who's
Mhm.
trying to like get them back and stuff, and then he's the one that ends up bringing the body bag up for bin Laden. Like I think like his inclusion adds another layer to that scene as well.
Again, I don't know his name, but he was a good character, and
Yeah,
we shouldn't like know more about him.
yeah,
But again, I just didn't know his name, so a lot of this was glossed over, which was kind of frustrating.
yeah.
So I think now we can get into our reviews. So what we're gonna do, like we did for the Dark Knight, for every um watch episode, that's a temporary name. We gotta find a better name for that. But like for these type of episodes, we are gonna end the episode with our ranking out of 10, and why we think that. So, anyone want to go first, or I can go first if
Yeah, you want to start?
I'll start. Initially, I really, really like this movie. Um, that after talking it out with you guys and just thinking about it, it's definitely lowered my rating for sure. It definitely lost some points, like Mike said. The performances were great. Jessica Chastain was great. No complaints there. I like the way the film was shot. The final attack on the compound was great. Um, it did a good job of building intensity there, but then I felt like there was a couple of missteps with character development and some scenes early in the movie and just explaining context and explaining names. I felt like this movie was assuming too much of us, and for that reason, I got to give it like a 7.3 out of 10.
Dude, no. Wow.
Okay.
Okay. I'll go next because that was probably going to be my exact score.
Really?
Yeah, honest, like down to the decimal point.
No way.
I was thinking 7.3. So like I just like to say that I think of an average movie as like a 6 out of 10, somewhere around there. I don't know. I think that's like the Rotten Tomatoes score for an average movie too. But so if an average movie is 6 out of 10, like you said, I think the performances, there's not a single bad performance in this movie. I like, I like all the way that the characters are portrayed. If I had to pick one, I'd probably say, honestly, probably that Chris Pratt was my favorite character.
And he was in the movie for
Yeah.
30 minutes.
I think, like we were saying, I don't really know. I think this movie brings up a lot of great questions, a lot of things to think about as far as like torture, what's ethical, what is like the life of someone in the CIA like. I think all that's great. Performances are great. But it's just, I feel like this movie could have been done in an hour and a half, honestly, and done the same thing for me. And, I don't know if that's a testament to like the writing or the like the character development or whatever, but I just feel like really this did not need to be 2.5 hours, like 2 hours and 40 minutes. I felt that was kind of unnecessary. Where this movie got a lot of these points come from the ending, the last 50 minutes of it. Great stuff. I think Jessica Chastain was great, but just what we talked about. No, not great character development, kind of all over the place. I'm not too invested in the process of finding bin Laden as I thought I would be. I thought they'd go on this awesome manhunt where they'd find all these like clues and stuff, but it's just kind of handed to her in a way. I'm not invested in her character too much, to be honest. So just to change it up a bit, I'm gonna give it like a 7.1 out of 10, I think. Just because, just to be different slightly from Degnan's score.
Mm-hmm.
Is this worth the watch?
It's 2.5 hours.
Because of the time length, I would actually say no. I don't want to tell you it's not a bad movie, but there are better movies you could watch in less time than this too. Like, do I think this is like a good war? It's a good war movie, yes. But I think right now I can think of 3, like American Sniper, 1917, or Saving Private Ryan, which is 3 hours long, by the way. But I would watch those movies 100 times before I'd watch this. And I think for me, that's just kind of what drags it down a bit too.
Mike, I say that's a good point about what I recommend this movie. I would recommend the last 30 minutes. I think the compound scene is great, and honestly, like from the moment they land on the compound and watching that till they leave, I think you can just look that up on YouTube. It'd be just great because it's such a great scene, and what we learn about those SEALs mostly is during their time on the compound, right? So I feel like you can do that and you still get a good sense of the great parts of this movie.
To say that like you won't be bored the first hour and a half or anything, because I think there are a couple great scenes as far as like building tension, and like some really well done scenes. But is it worth an hour and a half of time? No, it isn't. And it really isn't. And that's where I think like the hour and a half version of this movie, I think could have been just as good, probably better.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd say 7.1 out of 10. It's my final rating.
All right. Yeah, I'll go into mine then. I would echo most of what you two are saying. I know Rotten Tomatoes actually gave this a 91%. It's IMDb 7.4 out of 10. But I think, like I said, I'd echo everything you guys said. And I think also this is obviously a massive, massive moment in like American history, especially like contemporary American history of the time since we were born.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think like a documentary, like I've said, a documentary series would do a better job of showing everything that the movie tries to show. And I think like, yeah, am I glad I watched it? Sure. I'd say I'm glad I watched it. And there were definitely parts, like you guys said, the raid at the end that I really liked. But I think that this movie leaves a lot to be desired, especially because it's such a monumental moment, or it's depicting such a monumental moment in U.S. history. And for that reason, I'd give it actually a lower rating than both of you. I'd give it a 6.75.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. The 2 decimal places on the rating.
I didn't want to do like, I don't know, like whatever.
No,
maybe we'll go into like we'll be giving it like 8 decimal points by the end of our like last movie rating.
Because we just gotta keep consistency throughout. I think this movie does a fair job of portraying, this event. I mean, like I think the attack is super authentic, and I think the movie tries its best. I just think it's a little misguided in some of the character development and stuff, and we kind of touched on that.
Yeah.
This will be the final thing I'll say, but we didn't talk much about the final scene too, which I think like the point of that, to me, I think it's more to focus. I think instead of focusing on like, a woman's role, like, or her role, like trying to find a voice in the CIA or whatever, and like her character development, I think if you're going to do a movie about the process of finding bin Laden, like you need to focus on that solely, because that in itself is like you guys are saying, like that's huge. That's a huge moment in American history. You can get like a 2-hour action-packed deeply developed movie like that, I feel like they throw just too many other things about like random characters or whatever. I think this would have been great if they just, they focus on the process itself. And that's what they don't do. And again, that's why the movie hurt. That's why the movie is probably lower than I would have liked it to be, or definitely lower.
Yeah, we all rated it lower than I expected going in, but yeah.
It's the way it goes. That's all we have time for today. Thank you guys for listening. Follow us on social media, Instagram at whatisthebuzz, Twitter at wbuzzin, and Instagram and YouTube at what's buzzin. We'll be back tomorrow. Special guest tomorrow from a guy who is co-host of an elite podcast in the United States. Definitely come in and listen. It'll be a lot of fun. So until next time, keep buzzing.